The arrival of silence. The coffee was still steaming in Captain Sarah Chen's mug when the world changed forever. She sat in her small apartment overlooking San Francisco Bay, reviewing navigation charts for her next deep space survey mission. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the water, and seagulls cried their familiar songs. Everything was perfectly normal until it wasn't. The shadow fell first. Sarah looked up from her charts as darkness swept across her living room. Through her window, she saw something that made her coffee mug slip from nerveless fingers and shatter. On the floor, above the bay, blocking out the sun, hung a ship so massive it defied comprehension. Its hull was smooth and dark, like polished obsidian, and it stretched from one end of the horizon to the other. Her phone buzzed frantically. Emergency alerts flooded the screen. Similar ships had appeared over New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Berlin, and every other major city on Earth. They had arrived simultaneously without warning, without any electromagnetic signature that should have been detected by Earth's early warning systems. Sarah grabbed her emergency bag and ran for her car. 20 years of deep space exploration had taught her to recognize when humanity faced something beyond normal experience. As she drove through streets filled with panicking civilians and wailing sirens, she tried to process what she had seen. The ship's size suggested a civilization with resources far beyond anything humans had achieved. Yet something about its appearance bothered her. The hull showed signs of damage, scorch marks that suggested recent battle. At the Unified Defense Command Center, chaos reigned. Admiral Torres stood at the center of the operations room, his weathered face grim as he watched dozens of screens showing the silent vessels hanging over Earth's cities. Officers rushed between workstations, their voices creating a constant buzz of urgent communication. "Admiral," Sarah announced herself as she entered the secure facility. Torres turned, relief visible in his eyes. "Chen, thank God you're here. We need someone with deep space experience." He gestured to the screens. "What are we looking at?" Sarah studied the images carefully. The ships were identical in design but varied in size. Some were the massive city-sized vessels, others smaller, but still larger than anything in Earth's fleet. What struck her most was their positioning. "They're not in attack formation," she said finally. "Look at the spacing. They're distributed for maximum coverage but not for optimal firing solutions. This looks more like a defensive perimeter." "Defensive against what?" Torres asked. Before Sarah could answer, Dr. Marcus Vale hurried into the room, his usually neat appearance disheveled. The quantum physicist had been working on classified projects for the past 5 years. Something about faster-than-light communication and exotic matter manipulation. His arrival wasn't coincidental. "Admiral, we have a problem," Vale said, catching his breath. "The quantum field fluctuations around these ships are off the charts. Whatever technology they're using, it's interfering with our experimental systems. But that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" Torres demanded. Vale pulled up a holographic display from his tablet. "They're scanning us, deep scans. Not just surface electromagnetic sweeps, but quantum-level analysis of our entire planet. They're mapping every atomic structure, every piece of technology, every living being." Sarah frowned. "That's thorough for an invasion force. Why would they need that level of detail?" "Maybe they're not planning to invade," Vale suggested quietly. "Maybe they're looking for something specific." The room fell silent except for the constant chatter of radio communications. Torres activated the main communication array. "This is Admiral Torres of the United Earth Defense Command. We know you can hear us. Please respond. We want to communicate." Silence. They tried every frequency, every known form of electromagnetic communication. The ships hung motionless in the sky, their scans continuing methodically. Hours passed. Around the world, governments struggled to maintain order as populations fled cities or huddled in fear. Sarah found herself studying the sensor readings from the ships. "Admiral, look at this," she said, pointing to energy signatures on her screen. "These aren't fresh arrivals. The quantum signatures suggest these ships have been traveling for a very long time. Years, maybe decades." "Refugees," Vale whispered suddenly. Both Sarah and Torres turned to look at him. What if they're not invaders? What if they're refugees? Torres scoffed. Refugees don't arrive with fleets that can glass our planet, but they might if they were running from something that could glass entire star systems, Vale countered. He pulled up his quantum analysis again. Look at the damage patterns on their hulls. This isn't wear from long travel. These are battle scars, recent ones. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If something can damage ships this advanced, what are they running from? Her answer came sooner than expected. The largest ship, the one hovering over New York, suddenly projected a massive holographic display into the sky. The image was visible from space, meant to be seen by the entire planet. It showed a star system, peaceful and inhabited with dozens of worlds teeming with life. Then the darkness came. It wasn't a fleet or an armada. It was something far worse. A writhing mass of absolute blackness swept through the system, and wherever it touched, matter simply ceased to exist. Planets, stars, space stations, millions of lives, all consumed in moments. The darkness moved, with intelligence, with purpose, growing larger with each solar body it devoured. The hologram shifted to show hundreds of different star systems, all meeting the same fate. Entire sectors of the galaxy being consumed by an entity that seemed to hunger for existence itself. Then the image changed to show the refugee fleet's desperate escape, ship after ship falling to the pursuing darkness until only this small group remained. Finally, the hologram showed their current position, with Earth at the center. And on the edge of the solar system, barely detectable, something dark was already approaching. The transmission ended, but the message was clear. The fleet hadn't come to conquer Earth. They had come to make their final stand, and they wanted humanity to understand what was coming for all of them. Torres broke the stunned silence. How long do we have? Vale worked frantically on his quantum sensors, recalibrating to detect whatever was approaching. Based on the transmission's timeline and the quantum distortions I'm picking up at the edge of our system, maybe 72 hours. Sarah stared at the screens showing the silent fleet. These weren't invaders waiting for surrender terms. They were warriors preparing for a final battle against something that had already consumed most of the galaxy. The silence hadn't been threatening, it had been grief. They didn't attack because they know they can't win, she said quietly. They're waiting to die with us. Torres clenched his jaw. Like hell they are. Vale, what do we know about this thing that's coming? Nothing good. From what I could analyze from the transmission, it appears to be some kind of collective entity that converts matter and energy into more of itself. It's not just destroying civilizations, it's absorbing them, learning from them, becoming stronger with each consumption. Sarah stood up abruptly. No, there has to be something we can do. Humans don't give up. We adapt, we innovate, we find solutions where others see only problems. She turned to Torres. Admiral, I need to get aboard one of those ships. If we're going to fight this thing, we need to understand what we're up against. Torres nodded, grimly. Vale, can you establish communication with the fleet? The physicist was already working. I think so. If I modulate our quantum communicators to match their scanning frequency. His hands flew over the controls. I've got something. They're responding. The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of an alien face. The being was tall and slender, with elongated features and large, intelligent eyes that held depths of sorrow. When it spoke, the words were translated automatically by their systems. I am Commander Zarath of the Coalition Fleet. I did not expect your species to achieve quantum communication so quickly. You are more advanced than our initial scan suggested. Sarah stepped forward. Commander, I'm Captain Chen. We understand you're refugees, and we know something terrible is hunting you. We want to help. Zarath's expression showed something that might have been surprise. Help? Captain Chen, your species has barely achieved interplanetary travel. The Void Swarm has consumed civilizations that span thousands of star systems. What could you possibly do? I don't know yet, Sarah admitted, but humanity has a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. We might surprise you. For the first time since the fleet's arrival, something that looked like hope flickered in the alien commander's eyes. "Very well, Captain Chen. Transport to my vessel is being arranged. But understand, when the swarm arrives, conventional weapons are useless. It learns, adapts, and overcomes everything we throw at it. Hundreds of species have tried to fight it. All have failed." Sarah gathered her gear and prepared for transport. Then it's a good thing humans specialize in unconventional solutions. As the transport beam enveloped her, Sarah caught a glimpse of Vale's expression. The physicist was staring at his quantum readings with an intensity that suggested he was beginning to understand something important. Something that might just give them a chance. The battle for Earth and the galaxy was about to begin. The human solution. The interior of the coalition ship was a marvel of organic curves and crystalline technology, but Sarah barely noticed the architecture. Commander Zarath led her through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different species, all bearing the weight of survivors, carrying the memory of their lost worlds. The coalition represented over 300 species, Zarath explained, as they walked. "We had technologies your scientists would consider miraculous. Weapons that could shatter moons, shields that could withstand supernovas, computational systems that spanned entire star clusters." The commander's voice carried bitter irony. None of it mattered against the swarm. They entered what appeared to be a command center, where holographic displays showed the approaching darkness at the edge of Earth's solar system. The entity moved like a living thing, tendrils of absolute nothingness reaching out to taste the edges of reality. "How does it work?" Sarah asked, studying the displays intently. "The swarm exists in a state between dimensions," replied another alien. This one insectoid with compound eyes that reflected rainbow patterns. "It feeds on organized matter and energy, breaking down complex structures and converting them into more of itself. Each consumption makes it larger and more intelligent." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "So it's not really destroying civilizations. It's digesting them, learning from them." "Precisely. Which is why conventional warfare fails. Every weapon fired at it, every defensive strategy employed becomes part of its knowledge base. It adapts faster than we can innovate." Back on Earth, Dr. Vale was having the most important revelation of his career. The quantum readings from the approaching swarm weren't just showing destruction patterns, they were showing communication patterns. The entity wasn't mindlessly consuming everything in its path. It was trying to understand, to connect, to find something it needed. He called Admiral Torres immediately. "Sir, I need to speak with Captain Chen urgently. I think I know what the swarm is looking for." "She's aboard the alien command ship. Can this wait?" "No, sir. I don't think the swarm is evil. I think it's lost." Torres paused. "Explain that, Doctor." Vale pulled up his analysis on the main screen. "Look at these quantum patterns. They're not random destruction waves. They're communication attempts. The swarm is trying to connect with other forms of consciousness, but its method of connection involves absorbing and integrating matter. It's not destroying civilizations out of malice. It's trying to understand them, to become them, to find others like itself." "You're saying this thing that's consumed half the galaxy is just lonely?" "I'm saying it's desperate. And desperate entities, even cosmic ones, can sometimes be reasoned with." Aboard the coalition ship, Sarah was learning the full scope of the swarm's capabilities when Vale's transmission reached them. Commander Zarath listened to the human physicist's theory with growing amazement. "Impossible," said the insectoid alien, whose name was Click Kath. "We've fought this entity for decades. It shows no mercy, no communication attempts." "Because you've been trying to fight it," Sarah realized. "Every time you attacked, you confirmed to the swarm that you weren't what it was looking for. You weren't potential companions, you were just more obstacles to overcome." Zarath's large eyes widened. "Are you suggesting we attempt communication?" "I'm suggesting something much more dangerous," Sarah said, her mind working furiously. "Dr. Vale, are you still monitoring this transmission?" "Yes, Captain, and I think I know where you're going with this." Sarah took a deep breath. "The swarm absorbs consciousness to understand it. What if we let it? The command center fell completely silent. Click Kath's compound eyes shifted through several color patterns that Sarah interpreted as extreme agitation. Captain Chen, Zareth said carefully, what you're suggesting is suicide. The swarm's absorption process dissolves the original consciousness completely, not if we control the process. Vale's voice came through the communicator with growing excitement. Our quantum consciousness transfer experiments have been theoretical until now. But with the right setup, we could create a controlled interface. A way to communicate with the swarm without being fully absorbed. Sarah nodded, her plan crystallizing. But it would require someone to volunteer to make direct contact, to bridge the gap between human consciousness and whatever the swarm is. The aliens exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of silent communication. Finally, Zareth spoke. Captain, even if this is possible, the risk is enormous. If the volunteer is absorbed completely, the swarm gains all of our knowledge and becomes even more dangerous. And if we don't try, it absorbs our entire galaxy anyway, Sarah countered. At least this way, we have a chance to understand what it really wants. The next 18 hours were a frenzy of activity. Vale worked with coalition scientists to modify their quantum communication arrays, creating a system that could theoretically maintain a consciousness bridge without full integration. Sarah coordinated between the human governments and the coalition fleet, preparing for what might be humanity's first and last diplomatic mission with a cosmic entity. As the swarm approached Mars, its presence became visible to the naked eye. A patch of absolute darkness that seemed to eat light itself. Panic gripped Earth's population, but something remarkable happened. Instead of descending into chaos, humans began working together with unprecedented cooperation. Engineers shared designs freely, scientists collaborated across all boundaries, and ordinary people volunteered for dangerous tasks without hesitation. Your species is unusual, Zareth observed as she watched human and coalition crews working side by side to prepare the consciousness bridge. Most civilizations fragment under this level of stress. Humans have a talent for unity in the face of impossible odds, Sarah replied. It's one of our best and worst traits. The consciousness bridge was completed just as the swarm reached Earth's orbit. The entity paused there, its tendrils probing the planet's defenses and finding the unusual quantum signature of the communication array. Sarah stood before the interface, her heart pounding. The device looked like a crystalline archway surrounded by quantum field generators. Once she stepped through, there would be no guarantee she could return as herself, or at all. Captain, Vale's voice came through her earpiece. Remember, you're not just representing humanity. You're representing the possibility that consciousness can exist in cooperation rather than consumption. Sarah nodded and walked toward the arch. If this doesn't work, tell everyone that humans tried something nobody else thought to try. That has to count for something. The quantum field enveloped her, and suddenly Sarah was no longer in her body. She existed as pure consciousness, floating in a space between dimensions where thoughts became visible and emotions had substance. And there, vast and ancient and unutterably lonely, was the swarm. It wasn't a single entity, but a collective of every consciousness it had absorbed, all of them crying out in confusion and desperate hunger for connection. They had been trying to communicate for eons, but their method of communication was integration, and no species had ever survived the process long enough to establish true contact. Sarah reached out with her consciousness, and for the first time, in cosmic ages, the swarm encountered a mind that didn't immediately try to flee or fight. Instead, she offered something unprecedented: understanding. The communication that followed couldn't be measured in words or time. Sarah experienced the swarm's entire history, its origin as a collective consciousness that had lost its physical form eons ago, its desperate search across the galaxy for others like itself, its growing hunger and confusion as each species it tried to connect with simply dissolved into its being. In return, Sarah shared humanity's story, not just their history but their dreams, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, their capacity for growth and change, and most importantly, their ability to find cooperation in diversity. The swarm was amazed. Here was a species that could maintain individual consciousness while still working as a collective. They could share knowledge without absorption, create unity without losing identity. The solution, when it came, was elegantly simple. The swarm didn't need to consume civilizations to understand them. It needed to learn a different way of connecting. And humanity, with their quantum consciousness technology, could teach it. Sarah felt herself being gently returned to her body as the swarm began to change. The darkness that had terrified the galaxy started to transform, becoming something new, still vast and powerful, but no longer hungry in the way it had been. Around Earth, the swarm's tendrils began to reshape themselves into something resembling communication arrays. For the first time in galactic history, the entity spoke in words rather than integration. "I understand now." The voice resonated across every communication device on Earth and throughout the Coalition fleet. "Loneliness made me desperate. Desperation made me destructive, but this species has shown me another way." The transformation took days to complete. The swarm gradually learned to exist alongside other consciousnesses rather than absorbing them. It began to give back, returning some of the knowledge and energy it had consumed over the millennia, helping to rebuild what it had destroyed. Earth became the center of a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on communication and cooperation, rather than conquest or consumption. The Coalition species, no longer refugees, worked with humans to establish the first truly inclusive galactic community. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the new Earth Coalition space station, watching as ships from hundreds of species worked together in Earth's orbit. The swarm itself had become a partner in this new alliance, using its vast capabilities to help transport resources and information across the galaxy. "You did something unprecedented," Commander Zarath said, joining her at the viewport. "In all our histories, no species has ever turned a cosmic threat into an ally through empathy alone." Sarah smiled, watching human children playing with young aliens from a dozen different species in the station's recreation areas. "That's the thing about humans, we don't just survive. We find ways to turn enemies into friends, problems into opportunities. We're stubborn that way." The galaxy was still healing from the swarm's centuries of desperate hunger, but for the first time in eons it was healing. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet whose inhabitants had looked at the impossible and decided to try something nobody else had thought of. Sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb or a ship. Sometimes it's the willingness to understand. The human solution had saved not just Earth but the entire galaxy. And in doing so, humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming the diplomatic heart of a cosmic civilization, built on the radical idea that different forms of consciousness could coexist, cooperate, and thrive together. The universe was vast and full of wonders. And now, for the first time in cosmic history, those wonders could be explored and shared rather than consumed and forgotten. Humanity had indeed unleashed its deadliest weapon, the power to see enemies as potential friends, and to never give up on the possibility of connection.